Big report with Tara Sinclair, chief economist at job search site Indeed.com. What do we make out of this? I mean, it seems to be good news. As Michelle said, maybe good news is bad news because the markets are now worried about this rate hike, which, to be honest, I don't see what the big surprise is. We've known this all along, that when good news happens, they're going to consider the rate hike. But why the surprise all of a sudden?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. First of all, this report was a surprise in terms of where forecasters expected the jobs number to be this month. It was quite a bit higher. And so on that front, there's evidence that the Fed might move a little sooner for those of the members of the Fed that are really focusing on employment. But actually, a lot of the members are more looking at wages. And on that front, we actually got news in the opposite direction, which suggested that wage growth really doesn't seem to be accelerating at all. And on that front, that suggests still patience is probably still going to appear.
We talk about this a lot. Do the number of jobs being created with unemployment rate, when we look at that data, and wage growth, do they both have to move at the same exact time, or does one move first and the other kind of follows on a few months later?
Well, it depends on the situation in the economy, and we're in a really unique time here because on the one hand, we've got continued job growth, we've got dropping unemployment. We would think that the labor market's becoming quite tight and there would be a lot of pressure on wages. But we've got all of these people who are completely out of the labor force right now. And I think employers are still counting on those people coming back into the workforce. They're not feeling the pressure to compete with other employers as much on wages as they would be otherwise.
So, okay, so here's my follow-up. If there are less people looking for jobs and there are employers that want to hire these folks, isn't it a matter of time when pretty soon you're going to have to raise your wages? I mean, that's the natural thing that most of us would think.
Right, but they can actually raise them more slowly if there are more people that could potentially come back in because they have this sense that maybe just a small wage increase.
So they're gambling. They're gambling. They're just holding. But that's a short-term thing. If these folks on the sidelines don't come back, well, either you're not going to have employees to do the job, or you're going to have to simply pay more, right?
That's exactly right, and that's going to happen sometime in 2015. We're really going to finally see what's going to happen long-term with labor force participation and with wage growth.
Okay. There's a whole other stat besides the headline number of 5.5% of those people who've been out of work for a significant period of time that are still maybe looking or might look or have given up.
Right.
How should we take care of those individuals?
It's an excellent question, and it's really a challenge because I think what we're really hearing from the Fed is that that's not really something that they can affect. They can affect the overall unemployment rate, but they can't affect the long-term unemployment rate or this broader measure of unemployment. They can't really affect the quality of jobs. They can more affect the quantity. And so that leaves us to suggest other policy directions, although a strengthened economy generally will push employers to provide higher quality opportunities for workers because that's what they're going to need to do in order to entice people.
One stat that stands out to me in the middle of the crisis that we went through the last few years was that the youth unemployment number was high. We know it's high in Europe, but the U.S. isn't, we're a part of that stat as well. The economy's come back. The jobs have come back. How are they doing?
They're doing better. In fact, on some studies, the millennial generation, the young people just coming out of high school and college into the workforce, are really starting to see wage gains and perhaps actually better wage gains than some of the older workers. So that's good news. But on the other hand, a lot of them ended up in jobs that really weren't the right fit for them initially because they had to just take whatever could pay the bills rather than really taking the job that was the right fit for them. So hopefully
which is a good decision still.
Right. I mean, they have to pay the bills. But I'm really hoping that we'll see a lot of churn in the labor market, that these people that took these jobs just to pay the bills are now going to be looking for better fit jobs. But it might be more of a challenge, particularly for young people.
So if I told you 4 or 5 years ago that we'd be talking about 5% unemployment rate, I think you'd be doing a dance. I mean, we'd all be ecstatic and we'd be so happy. But is it me or people aren't really that happy about this? What's the psychological barrier that we can't get across?
There's a couple of things. First of all, that broad measure of unemployment, which I think people tangibly feel is still elevated. I mean, it's still at 11% this month when we look at the broader unemployment rate. But if we look at that 5.5% rate, this month it actually came down not totally because people found jobs. It actually came down somewhat also because people left the labor force. And so that's not the best way to see the unemployment rate come down.
We mentioned earlier some of the hot spots. Any particular places that you can give advice to the folks looking for jobs out there? Where's the hottest place to be looking for jobs right now on sites like yours?
So on Indeed, it's healthcare, it's tech. There are just huge gaps in terms of job openings and having job seeker be interested in those areas. It has been growing lately, that's the good news, but we'd like to see even more job seekers get the skills needed to take those jobs because those are going to be growing in the future.
And very quickly, does the Fed have to raise rates sooner, in your opinion?
In my opinion, actually, I tend to be focusing on those wage numbers, and as long as those stay low, I don't think there's a lot of pressure on the Fed.
Okay, we'll tell the markets that. Tara Sinclair, good to see you on this Friday. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
helping us digest those big jobs numbers.